Hi, you're listening to the Professional Speaks podcast with me, Craig McKellar, your host. As an ex-Big Four auditor for 6 years, I now run a specialist recruitment consultancy called McKellar Consulting. Throughout this podcast, I speak to senior leaders from the professional services community, past, present and future. These leaders work in accounting and finance, audit, tax, corporate finance, consulting, legal and investments. In the comfort of their own office, I will be posing questions to our guests to gain insights from them across a variety of topics, including balancing work and life, mental health and mindset, risk-taking, and effective leadership. These insights will help us learn, be inspired, grow, and ultimately succeed in what we want to achieve in our careers. Here's what's coming up on today's episode.
It's incredibly difficult to deal with, and I know one of the things that we do as an organisation is we work with entrepreneurs. So we work with people who are leading organisations, and the last 5 years for me has almost been like a PhD in entrepreneurship and leadership, and I have learned so much, and I'm still learning, and I think it's a constant struggle. So I know that I would have always thought to myself, well, actually, a small organisation with 16 staff, how could it be that difficult? There's people who are running organisations with thousands of staff. But then you go and meet those people and you talk to them and you realise that actually it's, if you're invested in what you do and you're giving of yourself as much as you are, it doesn't matter if it's 10 people or if it's 1,000 people that you're running, you're always on, you're always in. Mm-hmm. And that's the real challenge.
In this episode, I am joined by Sean McGrath, who is the CEO of Entrepreneurial Scotland and an advisory board member of Scottish Edge. Topics discussed include his motivations for career decisions, why he studied to be a chartered accountant, and his passion for promoting the best young talent who are the leaders of tomorrow. Okay, Sean, thank you very much for being part of this podcast. And for listeners and viewers that maybe don't know you, you're currently CEO of Entrepreneurial Scotland and an advisory board member for Scottish Edge, which is a business competition which maybe you can come on to more. So I've kind of said, what you're doing currently, but just so people can get to know you, it'd be good to hear maybe a bit more about, I guess, your background and upbringing, if you'd be willing to share that.
Yeah, happy, and thanks a million for having me on as a guest. Always great to have an opportunity to talk about the organisation, and always happy to talk about my career as well, because I'm actually quite passionate about being an accountant, which, accountancy and passion aren't necessarily two words that come together very often. But I, as you'll detect from the accent, I'm actually Irish. And so I grew up in a wee village in rural Ireland, in a place called Tipperary. And I was the last of 6 kids, living on a kind of a small hold farming. And I always take great pleasure in telling my sons, because I've 2 boys and a wee girl, and always take pleasure in telling my sons who complain about sharing a room that when I was their age, not only did I share a room, but I also shared a bed. Yeah. So they have very little to complain about. So we were kind of a classic 80s setup in Ireland back in the day, and was lucky enough to go on to university in Ireland, and I studied a general business degree, a commerce degree as it was called back then, which probably sounds even more ancient now than it did then. And then from university, I did what most Irish people do, and I went backpacking off to Australia for a couple of years. And it was actually out in Australia that I met a lovely young Scottish lass, which is the reason why I'm actually based here in Scotland now. So that was 2004, I think it was, when we met. So coming up for 20 years. And it was eventually 2006 when I moved over to Scotland. And at that point, I was working in sort of sales and marketing type roles. I had come back from Australia and basically owed some cash because I'd had a very, very good time when I was there. Mm. And I remember going into a recruitment agency and saying, look, I'll do anything from, I'll clean toilets to run multinationals. You tell me, I got people I need to pay. Mm. And I guess the gift of the gab landed me a role in sales. And I spent a year actually working with Red Bull as a brand manager for them in Ireland, and that was a phenomenal experience and even more fun than you would imagine it to be. and then made the decision, obviously, to move over to Scotland because that's where Sarah was and that's where I wanted to be. And came over and worked in sales roles for maybe another 4 or 5 years when I got here. And then it was actually in my late 20s, I'd say about maybe 28, 29, when I kind of realised that, look, I was quite ambitious. I knew what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. And I was realising that actually in sales, you're only ever as good as your last quarter. And whilst I enjoyed it and I was very good at it and I had quite a decent career, I knew that I was building on quicksand. It was hard to build a foundation upon which I could kind of push forward. And so at that time, I remember looking at all the people I was selling to. So every time I walk into an office, it was either the CFO I would end up dealing with, or it was the CEO who used to be the CFO. And there was just this kind of common thread coming through that actually, you know, these accountants seem to be getting everywhere. So when I was 30, just before I was 30, I took the decision to hand back the keys to my very nice company car, to slash my salary by more than 60%, and to go back and retrain as an accountant with Deloitte. And that was kind of the start of my professional services journey.
And that was is that in Glasgow? Deloitte?
Yes, yeah. So that was Deloitte in the Glasgow office.
Yeah. And you met some people, you know, as you said, in your sales career who were accountants and thought, you know, they've got some good jobs. Did you know anyone else that, you know, was an auditor or worked as an accountant or in the Big Four, or know anything kind of much about it at all? So,
yes and no. So actually a couple of friends that I had been at university with in Galway, so I had studied this general business degree and I had kind of gone on to specialise in marketing, and they had gone down the accountancy route, and they had gone straight after university into accountancy, you know, the standard, and they'd done the Irish version of ICAS and were accountants back home in Ireland. And I remember ringing them up when I was nearly 30 and just saying, guys, like, I'm having this moment where I'm trying to think about where I want to go and what I want to do. And it was listening to them talk about the benefit of, you know, what accountancy had done for them. And one was still in practice, one was out of practice, and just how useful it had been there. And that really helped me to understand that, because I always knew I wanted to end up in a seat like the one I'm in at the moment, in terms of, you know, running an organisation. And I knew that in order to get there, I had to have a degree of credibility. I had to have a reason to be in the room. And sales is an amazing skill and ability, and it, to me, is the lifeblood of any organisation. But it's very difficult to stand out from the crowd, and it's very difficult to establish your credibility in that field. Whereas it's much easier to establish your credibility as an accountant, because everyone generally has an understanding of the importance of accountancy and the money and the finance side of things. So, I mean, I was swithering, I was having a think about which kind of path to go down, but it was having that chat with those guys, with guys that I trusted, who gave me the confidence to try and do that, especially at my age, because when you go back as, you know, almost 30 years of age, you're pretty sure you're going to be ruled out, because, you know, most students go back through this process. It's like a pathway, and they go straight after university, and it seems like a pretty set path. So I was worried that I was going to have to ask a firm to take a chance on what at the time I considered to be an older guy, but I'd give anything to be 30 again.
Just on that as well, you know, this podcast is a lot of us professional services community, right? So maybe focusing on that that move that you made from sales into professional services. Do you feel that the experience you had in sales, you know, really helped you with clients or with kind of colleagues type of thing? You know, did going in to train your CA as an experienced person, but not just an experienced person, but somebody from the sales environment, would you say that helps? Because I guess maybe, like you maybe said earlier, you know, well, sales and maybe the accountancy might not always seem like they're together.
Yeah. Undoubtedly. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind at all that helped. I mean, I've been very lucky to progress in my career, but the way I look at it is that actually it's almost everything I learned in my sales career that has helped me to progress a little bit quicker. but it was the credibility that I got from being an accountant that gave me that solid foundation. So that was the kind of the basis for the rocket, and the fuel really was what I had learnt in the sales environment. Like I remember so I went back and trained with Deloitte, and I spent 5 very, very happy, very busy, but very happy years with Deloitte. And I really enjoyed working with those guys, and enjoyed the environment and everything that went with it. But I remember really understanding why certain people progressed in the firm and others didn't. And so, you know, we would always, as kind of juniors, we would always have a chat, and we'd be like, God, I can't believe this particular person's a partner, because they don't know half as much as that particular person who's not a partner, and they should be the partner. But when you stopped and I looked at it through my sales lens, I was like, well, I know exactly why that person's a partner, because they have the ability to build the relationships, and they have the ability to bring the business in, and they're the person that people are going to want to work with, as opposed to the other individual who's really nice, but really, really very technical, and actually maybe doesn't get to the root of what the person's real problem is. Because, you know, 9 times out of 10, what people are looking for is they're not looking for a technical answer. They're just looking for you to empathise and understand what the problem is, and then they're looking for you to jump into the trenches beside them and give them a hand with it. And it's the people in professional services who understand that that's what people really want, and that's what people react to, that do well. So that kind of sales side, you know, helped me a great degree with, you know, dealing with people. Even as a junior when I was in audit, you know, just trying to get information out of people, and their natural sort of combative approach to some, you know, relatively young guy asking questions, and just being able to empathise and build relationships really, really helped.
No, that's really interesting to know. And I was just thinking there as well, you kind of had you've had this career in sales because you enjoyed it, right? So you're moving around roles, progressing because you enjoyed it. You then made a decision to move or change career into CA for kind of a different reason, for the credibility aspect of it. So then what is it you did after Deloitte, and could you maybe give us an idea of your decision making around that next move? Because I think for a lot of people in professional services, for some people they do make that move, and it's quite a big move to make.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I always had a plan. I'm not a planner per se, but I always had ambition. And by that I don't mean ambition as in, you know, I wanted to take over the world, but I had an ambition. I had an ambition to progress, to move on. And so I was always, whenever I was looking at kind of, right, well, where's the next step? I was always trying to think about, well, you know, will this help me get to where I want to be? One of the things I learned pretty early on with sales is that money doesn't equal happiness. Now that's an easy statement to say if you've got lots of money, which I don't, but if you do have lots of money, it's easy to say that. But, you know, when you work in an environment that is so money focused and so target driven, and then you do succeed and you achieve and it's great, but you realize the cost that it's had, it just gives you that appreciation. And so, you know, pretty early on in my career, I'd say probably by the time I was 26, 27, I had made the decision that I was never going to be driven by just money alone. I mean, I've got 3 young kids, so I always need to earn a decent wage to support my family. So I will always be true to that. But I realised that actually it's not worth it. You know, if you've got an amazing salary and you can go to Disneyland 3 times a year, but you're miserable the rest of the year, then that's no good to anybody. So I've always been sort of driven by what I want to do as opposed to, you know, what the next financial milestone might be. And that was quite important because when I worked in practice, when I worked in Deloitte, like I said, you know, I really enjoyed it, and it was a lot of pressure and a lot of hours, and a lot of hard work, but it was fun. And I remember getting to, I was about 5 years in, I was at manager level, and again, I was enjoying it, but I was coming to that stage where actually I was going to start a family, and my wife was pregnant. And I remember talking to the partner that I worked for and just kind of asking him, I was like, gosh, you know, how do you balance this? Because he was only a couple of years older than me. And I remember him saying, right, well, I run into work in the morning, so that's my exercise. I socialise with my clients, so that's my social life. And I like to keep a certain part of the weekend free for the kids. And I just thought to myself, oof, that's pretty full on. That's a lot, So I couldn't envisage myself doing that, and I couldn't envisage my wife being happy with that. Actually, I could envisage myself doing that, because when you get caught up in that, and you enjoy your work, it's easy to be selfish and throw yourself into it. But I couldn't see my wife going with that, and I didn't want it for my kids either.
Yeah,
so
I should touch on that. I think it's good that partner was honest with you.
Oh yeah,
in that respect, and I think obviously, partners, whether it's audit, tax, corporate finance, they'll all manage their life and work differently. But I think it's important for partners, directors, senior leaders to just be open and transparent with below them, because I think that path is not for everybody. It's for somebody, and also it does depend on where you work and who you're working for, and maybe what's expected. Would you agree with that? It can be different in different places.
100%.
Yeah, it's just that where you were,
yeah,
I guess that wasn't for you.
It could have been. I mean, I could have seen myself doing it. Like I say, I really enjoyed it. But I was mature enough, I suppose, to understand where that road was going to take me, and what that was going to cost in the roundest sense of the word. And it's not that I wasn't prepared to pay that price. It's just that I knew that my circumstances wouldn't work. You always remember someone else in the firm talking to me about it as well. And I was very lucky. I had a lot of really good mentors when I worked at Deloitte. And I remember them talking about the fact that it's a family effort, and every year, they did anyway back in my time when I was with Deloitte, they used to do the ball. And the ball was as much to celebrate your partners as it was you and the efforts that you put in, because they understood that actually this is an ask of your family. This is an ask of your partner, because they need to be there to support you while you're supporting the work that the firm is doing. So, I think if you go into it eyes wide open, if you know what you're doing, I think it's a fabulous opportunity, because it's a treadmill or a track, and it's very defined and very laid out, and there aren't many workplaces where if you put the work in, you will get the reward. You go out into industry and it's a lot more unstructured. So that's the kind of sort of pros and cons. And again, from an industry side, so I did my 5 years in Deloitte, as I say, really enjoyed it, but I needed to find something that was more suited to where I was going to be with my family life. And I joined a property investment firm, and I still worked really, really hard and did, plenty hours, but it was, there was a lot less travel involved in it. It was more sort of steady state. It wasn't like big busy seasons. And so that worked for me, but it's still quite hard work. So it's not that you're talking about, well, I'm going to have this quiet life over here and I'm going to have this hectic life over here. It really depends on what you want to put in. But I would say in terms of industry, I worked for a company called LSI, London Scottish Investments, and when I joined, it was a regional REIT, was the product that we looked after, joined as financial controller, and there was about 350 million of assets under management at that time, and I think when I left about 3 years later, it was something like 750 million of assets under management, and the organisation as a whole had about 1 billion of assets under management. And so it was this kind of really steep growth curve that was brilliant from an educational perspective. But again, it's, you're looking for opportunities, you're looking for chances to grow, and that's what attracted me when I was leaving Deloitte to LSI, was the fact that it was this organisation on the up. It was this growth journey that I would get to be part of, and then I would get to learn, and then I would get to also be able to talk about what I had learnt. Because if you want to progress, if you want to push on, you have to be able to have examples of things that you've done to demonstrate to whoever's going to take the next chance on you that you're capable of doing it.
I guess moving to a role like that makes sense given your sales background. You obviously thrive in an environment where there's growth. where you can achieve growth.
Yeah. I think for me, it comes down to structure. And, you know, a bit of an odd thing for an accountant to say, but I don't love structure. And the reason I don't love structure is because there's not much room for manoeuvring, and there's not much room for standing out. And so actually when things are in a state of flux, so I always see crisis as opportunity, because when things are in a state of flux, that's your opportunity, that's your chance. You know, everybody's a good leader when things are going well. But it's only the great leaders that stand out when things aren't going well. And so actually occasionally you need the odd bit of challenge to be able to demonstrate your ability to do something different. And so it was great to be able with LSI, for example. Really loved working there, some great people working in that organisation, and a real ambition to grow. And it was a great chance just to demonstrate that you had the passion and you had the hunger and you could do more than just the steady state, which was really enjoyable.
And then was it next move after that?
So that was Entrepreneurial Scotland, the next move. Yeah.
How did that come about? What was the attraction to that?
So as I said, I was quite happy with LSI. I was really quite enjoying it. We still had, there was still a bit of growth to be had with that organisation, still more to go on the roller coaster. But I was beginning to become conscious. I'd spent 3 years there, and you know, I do think careers are things that need to be managed. You need to be thinking about them, because if you're not going to push yourself forward, no one else will. You know, you can't sit there and expect someone to manage your career for you. Might happen in certain environments, and again, that's where something like you know, Big Four practice is great, because there's a path laid out. But generally speaking, if you're in industry, it's up to you. You've got to manage your own career. And so I really enjoyed it. Really liked the people I was working with. Could easily have seen myself being there for years more. But I knew that I wanted to push on. I knew I had ambition. The finance director I was working for was not that much older than me, so I knew that there wasn't going to be an opportunity to progress into that role. And so I was looking about for opportunities to come my way. And that's when I was approached for a role with Entrepreneurial Scotland. And it hadn't even been on my radar. I mean, I am a card-carrying capitalist, if I'm being really honest about it. And so the notion of working in the charity sector or the third sector just had never crossed my mind. But I've always had just this deep respect for entrepreneurs, and this admiration for them. And so I kind of described it as being a bit like, you know, you're a lifelong Man United fan and someone's offered you the opportunity to become the kit man. You know, you get to be in the dressing room, you get to see all the stuff that's happening. So I remember sitting down and thinking about it, and I was like, well, actually it gives me a chance to be a finance director. It was a finance director role I went in as. Give me some experience of that. It was a decent sized organisation. And then I'll do a couple of years there. You know, I'll really enjoy it. It's a bit of my give back to society. I'll make some connections, and then I'll just go back to being a capitalist and, you know, back into investment world. And that was about 5 years ago, so that didn't go to plan.
Yeah. No, I mean, tell us more about your current role then. I know I touched on what you do, but not actually what your role entails. It'd be interesting to hear. Yeah,
well, look, it's pretty all encompassing. So I started as the finance director and spent a couple of years working with the previous CEO, Sandy Kennedy, who is a good friend of mine and someone I admire a huge amount. And then 2 years in, there was an opportunity to take over from Sandy. Sandy was looking for new opportunities and looking for a successor. And so that was coming up for 3 years now, 3 years ago, that I took on the CEO role for the organisation. And so my role really is to try and guide and shape and grow the organisation. Entrepreneurial Scotland as an organisation has been around in one form or another for sort of 20, 25 years. And we have quite a long history. But what we had built up over that time was also quite a bit of ambiguity around what it is that we did. So I remember when I joined, people would always say to me, "Oh, Entrepreneurial Scotland, got him. I love you guys. I'm not really sure what it is you do, but I'm just excited by the name. I love you guys." And then it would take an age to try and explain what we did. I used to call it the Burj Khalifa elevator pitch, because it was, I'd need to buy you a pint to be able to explain it all. And so over the last few years, what we've done is really kind of clarified that. The charity itself, it's really, really simple. It's, an Entrepreneurial Scotland is a prosperous Scotland. It's as simple as that. And our job is to find people capable of creating that prosperity and driving it forward. Most people call them entrepreneurs, but we call them entrepreneurial leaders. And so for us, an entrepreneur is not somebody who starts a business. It's actually somebody who recognises a good idea and then executes it, because that's what entrepreneurship is. It's getting stuff done, as opposed to having lots of ideas, because that's either an inventor or a dreamer. It's an entrepreneur that gets it done. And so our job is really just to find people like that and nurture them and support them and help them build the belief and the connections that they need to succeed. Because if they succeed, Scotland succeeds. It's dead simple.
And in your role, it's also got a lot of responsibility as well. Am I right in thinking you manage several people?
Yeah, so we've got a team of 16, and we have quite a lot of processes to get through in the year, and the organisation itself is probably about 1.5 to 2 million a year in terms of what it is that we do. And there's quite a bit to it. So I'm lucky I've got a good senior team, but generally speaking, a lot of people will think that, and I would have thought that, charity life was quiet life, but it is quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. Because actually you are running an organisation that is inherently designed to address something that the market doesn't normally address. So you're almost always working on a problem where there's a funding challenge. And ours is no different what we do. So, the single biggest program that we do is an internship program, where we find really, really talented people and we help them to get opportunities that really open up their mind and really connect them with their potential. But we have to go out and we have to encourage companies to take these young people on and convince them of the power of building a talent pipeline. And when I joined the organisation, we were able to fund about 50% of what we could do, and then you have to find the resources for the other 50%. And my mission is to turn this charity from a charity into an institution, so a self-sustaining institution. So this year we'll fund about 81% of what we do. Next year it'll be 92%, and the year after it'll be 100% if we hit our targets and milestones. And so it's brilliant, but I've got to find that 19% gap this year and 8% next year and so on. So there's a huge amount of pressure and challenge and responsibility that comes with that. And you are always on. You are always the champion for the business, for the organisation rather. And I remember saying to you before that actually for me, particularly the type of person I am, I run this organisation like it's a business, and I run it like it's my business. And I put the same level of passion and commitment into it. And that's pretty all-encompassing.
Yeah, and all-encompassing meaning, I guess just with the demands that it requires and from you. I mean, how do you, to manage 16 people, to have, these targets to hit, it's a lot of responsibility in that, how do you, and you're passionate about it, right? And so when you're passionate about something, you could just work every hour under the sun if you were able to on it. So I mean, and you've got a young family, you've got a family. How do you manage that? Because I think that's another question for people that are looking to aspire to get to the top, or even people currently at the top that maybe are struggling with that balance. How do you deal with it?
It's incredibly difficult to deal with, and I know. One of the things that we do as an organisation is we work with entrepreneurs. So we work with people who are leading organisations, and the last 5 years for me has almost been like a PhD in entrepreneurship and leadership, and I have learned so much, and I'm still learning, and I think it's a constant struggle. So I know that I would have always thought to myself, well, actually, a small organisation with 16 staff, how could it be that difficult? There's people who are running organisations with thousands of staff. But then you go and meet those people and you talk to them and you realise that actually if you're invested in what you do and you're giving of yourself as much as you are, it doesn't matter if it's 10 people or if it's 1,000 people that you're running, you're always on, you're always in. And that's the real challenge. And so for me, I wish I dealt with it better. I'll be honest about that. I am consumed by it an awful lot. And in some ways I want to be consumed by it because I enjoy it and because I love it. I don't fight against it as much as I probably should. And I have friends and people that I do work with who are much better at separating and creating the divide than I am. And one of my sort of ambitions for myself for this year is to try and better separate between personal and work. I think the thing I've learned is that you have to be able to step back from it. Whether it's your own personal ambition to have a better work-life balance or not, that's a good thing. But even if you have no other demands in your time, and even if you could give 100% of your time to your organisation, it's better for the organisation if you don't.
Yep.
Because it's a marathon, not a sprint. And most of the epiphanies that I've had around things that need to change or need to happen in the organisation have been in moments when I haven't been consumed by work and when I haven't been thinking about it. So actually you need to have that break. You need to kind of there's a great phrase that a lot of people talk about. You need to be on your business instead of in your business. And that includes taking time out and take time away from it.
So drawing a line at working every evening, or drawing a line at working at the weekend, or drawing a line at, I can't do any exercise because I've got too much work to do. You're saying, make sure you live life as well as putting your all into the work that you enjoy, so that you're better equipped to.
If you listen to any of the top athletes, they will talk to you about rest periods and why their rest periods in between training sessions are just as important as the training sessions themselves, because you have to have the recovery to get the gains. And it's a little bit like that in our world too. It's harder to draw the line, but actually it is the same thing. If you don't have the recovery, we had a pretty full-on period pre-Christmas, and we were just going non-stop and working every hour under the sun, and I could feel my energy and my passion for what we do waning. And then Christmas came along, and actually I love Christmas because it's the one time when, even if you're an email junkie like me, it doesn't matter because nobody else is on the emails. So properly shut down, proper chance to recover over Christmas, and then you just come back a different animal. And I did come back a different animal in the new year, just ready to go again. And it's little moments like that help you to realise that, you've got to fill the tank up again. And so even if it's, not about work-life balance, even if it's not about spending more time with the kids, it's from a business perspective. If you want to give your business the best, you've got to give yourself a rest to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I wanted to touch on the internship programme as well. So you didn't mention the name of it, but would you like to say a bit more on that? Because you've got a passion for entrepreneurs and businesses. I think you've also got a passion for future leaders as well, and that's what this programme helps with, I believe. Yeah,
no, definitely, and thank you for reminding me to chat about it, because it is so important. I mean, so it's the Saltire Internship Programme. And as I said, we've been doing this now for nearly 20 odd years, this particular programme. And in that time, we've put nearly 2,000 young people through the programme. And we've been, forgive the Irish guy saying this, but we've been fantastically Scottish about hiding our light under a bushel and not actually telling everybody what it is we do. And the reality is that we've actually built the single largest grad recruitment programme that exists in Scotland. We are the only programme of our kind that operates in Europe. It is a huge programme, and it is without a doubt a kind of a leading light in the Scottish entrepreneurial ecosystem. And what we do every year is we spend hundreds of thousands of pounds running a recruitment process that you would normally see in KPMG or Deloitte or Goldman Sachs or Unilever or one of these guys. And we are on every single university campus, and we are banging the drum about our internship program. It's a global, fully funded internship program that we run. And so we can give students opportunities all over the world. And this attracts thousands and thousands of students. That and the fact that if somebody wants to apply for an internship with KPMG, they have to go through a process. If they want to do that with Deloitte, they have to go through another process. If they want to do that with Goldman Sachs, they have to go through another process. Actually, they just have to go through one process with us. It's intense, but they have to go through one process, and at the end of it, there's hundreds of job opportunities. Mm-hmm. So because of this, so many students on Scottish campuses are drawn into the programme, and then we, for want of a better term, we put them through the meat grinder. We put them through this really intense application process that only about 1,200 make it through. Then we put them through an assessment centre. So it's an in-person assessment centre that about 900 people will be called forward for. Mm-hmm. It's 3 different workshops across a half day, and each workshop they're assessed by up to 6 different individuals. And what we are looking for is, we're not necessarily looking for their academic ability, but we're looking for their attitude and their ambition and their hunger and their drive. All those kind of attributes that we know make great leaders. Mm-hmm. And those are the students that make it into our candidate pool, those ones that have that spark. And about 650 students will do that, make it into that pool. Mm-hmm. And then we make those students available for companies to take in as interns over the summer. And the quid pro quo for a company is that, they're helping us. It's wonderful. They're doing an amazing thing. They're helping us to develop the next generation of leaders. Mm-hmm. But equally, rather selfishly, what they're doing is they're getting access to a talent pool,
top talent,
that is normally reserved for bigger companies. Mm-hmm. So it really works from a kind of commercial setting for the business, and it works for us because it gives us the opportunity to really give these people an experience that helps them stand out from the crowd.
And can I ask, it's not just finance internships, is it?
No, everything. Yeah. So we actually don't look at your background at all, your degree, qualification, any of that stuff. So students, when they apply, it's students who are in their 3rd or their 4th year in a Scottish university, and we don't look at their degree qualification until they're in the candidate pool. Mm-hmm. Then we'll have a look at that and we'll say, right, well, obviously, you might want to go for this type of role, or you might want to go for that type of role. But equally, we have a lot of people who will take students, say, from a finance background and put them in a non-finance internship if that's what the student wants. The students have to apply for it, and the companies have to select them, so it's always what people want.
Great. So students can say what they'd quite like to do, and also location-wise, they could say where they fancy going. And this would be over, if they're 3rd year, this would be over the summer.
Yeah.
4th year to be once they've graduated.
Yes, so it's always in the summer, always during the summer months. And so it's usually your summer when you're 3rd to 4th year, 3rd you're going into 4th year, or it's your summer when you've just finished your final exams. As I said, we have roles in America, Canada, Australia, Asia, Europe, all over the world. But we also have quite a big chunk of roles here in Scotland, and in the rest of the UK as well. So obviously a lot of people like to go for the San Diego posting and things like that, but equally students are just as ambitious and hungry to get placed in companies in Scotland, because I call it 2 needles in a haystack. So the students that we find, if you think about it, these people have huge amounts of potential, but how do they stand out from the crowd? Because their CV says the same thing as everybody else, studying at university, working part-time in Tesco. There's nothing for an employer to hang their hook on. But what we do is we eyeball all these brilliant people, and then we put a sticker on them and we say, look, you've been through our process and we know you're amazing. This will help you to stand out from the crowd. So that lifts that needle out of the haystack. But it's the same thing for companies, because if you're on Indeed or S1 or wherever you may choose to advertise, how do you stand out from all the other people who are looking for a software engineer or a finance analyst or whatever your role might be? You can't. And so you've got all these incredible companies who actually, they're not offering a job, they're offering an opportunity, but they can't stand out from the crowd. So what we do in sourcing them is we do the exact same thing. We lift that needle out of the haystack, and we just help these really talented, bright, ambitious individuals meet with a company that has opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great initiative, and I think there'll be people listening to this who might not have been aware of it, so thanks very much for explaining it.
Yeah, cheers.
And just as we're finishing up as well, the podcast, I always like to ask guests about the next 12 months in terms of having personal goals and professional goals. Do you have any?
Oh, I've loads. So look, a personal goal for me is that balance. So I love what I do, absolutely love it, and I have to get the balance right. And so I'm working harder, and I'm working with someone to try and help me get that balance right, get my head clear, so that I'm in the game when I need to be in the game, and then I'm out of the game when I want to recover. So that's a personal goal and ambition for me this year. From a business perspective, from an organisational perspective, we have recently relaunched our membership, and my ambition and my desire is to really see that membership grow and come back up. So this is where we bring together people who are leading in businesses in Scotland right now, because as you will know from talking to people in these types of roles, it's really stressful and it's really difficult and it's incredibly lonely. And actually, if you run a business with 50 or 60 staff, then it's usually you, maybe one other person who's carrying that responsibility. And that's a lonely place to be. So we run a membership that brings these people together. And I'm just really passionate this year about re-establishing that as the penultimate place to go, the premier place to go for meeting other business leaders and having that ability to connect.
Brilliant. Well, wish you the best with both of those goals.
Yeah.
And thanks again for coming on, Sean. It's been great to chat to you.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Craig.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Professional Speaks podcast. This podcast was produced by Springwood Studio Productions. Remember, you can watch the episode recording on our YouTube channel, and if you can, please do subscribe and share with all of your friends. The more people who listen to this, the more guests we can have on to share, so that you can learn, be inspired, grow, and ultimately succeed in what you want to achieve in your career. Please also contact me if you have any feedback on this episode. I'd love to hear from you.